I miss everything about Gaza. I miss Gaza as a whole, people, streets, the beach, the warmness of daily life there.
I miss being in a community. I miss walking in the street and just say hi to everybody and talk to everyone, discuss any topic.
I experienced several wars. I experienced humanitarian crisis, but all these things were part of my history, part of my life.
I miss the land. I miss Gaza itself. I miss the beach. I miss interacting with people in a human level, where you just talk freely.
I will go back to my activism. I will go back to do something for my own people, hopefully soon. Political willingness to put pressure on Israel in order for Palestinians to feel that there is a space where they can work within, or they can at least negotiate.
Globalization in Palestine is very limited to the trade, to the closure, to the economic movement we have. For example, talking about economic or trade movement, 9% growth in 2011 was mainly because of international donors and aid and private investment. We have so many closures, so many legal issues to go through with Israel. So free trade movement or free people movement is not really applicable to Palestinians.
That Palestinians have the right to build their own states in the occupied territories of 1967 and to be a neighbor and to live in peace with their Israeli neighbor.
Talking about the Palestinian policy, they chose to follow the neoliberal path. And they chose to call themselves neoliberal because, for example, talking about the full integration with the Israeli economy or being fully liberal in terms of our trade regime with the Israeli policy, to be dependent on the Israeli economy, whereby some statistics showed that since the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, some income divergence is the only trend in Palestinian-Israeli economic relation.
I'm not only blaming the Palestinians or Palestinian leadership, but it's the whole world system, it's the Arab leadership, it's the international community that all put pressure on Palestinians in order to create sort of balance with their interest towards the Israeli government.
A new discourse about the need, the Palestinian need for a private sector-led economy, where at some point I don't really agree with private-led growth of economy because we have a very unstable public sector where it's quite impossible to turn this unsteady public sector into a privatized companies, whether a problem with electricity, half of the electricity sector is controlled by Israel. To privatize this means we are having a direct contract or contact with the Israeli government, which at some point, this is what the Palestinian Authority called themselves neoliberals.
The international community and the European governments, the EU, they are not very much serious on their pressure in Israel because they are worried of making any sort of tension with the Israeli government. And I think this is the main, from my point of view, this is the main cause why Israel is going on with its violation of Palestinian rights and continuing and expanding the settlement.
The peace agreement controlled the Palestinian economic capacity, controlled it and weakened it because it kept Israel in control of the land, the water and the borders.
International know exactly the problem, and they always saying, okay, we'll support the Palestinian Authority, but this is not a solution. The humanitarian aid, the millions of dollars paid from the European governments and from the American administration, from my point of view, it's wasting money because it doesn't serve a long-term stability, long-term economic stability, social or political stability. And it's politics that, determine the future of Palestine. It's not the money paid from the international community. We have the right to have our own state and to depend on our resources in order to make a society that is productive, like other societies in the world. Palestinians have the highest education level of education in developing countries, but how we invest in our education or our people's education.
Discussing what Oslo Agreement was about to say, it was mainly about the fact that they wanted Palestine to be dependent country. But in real life, dependent country means no borders, a freedom of movement, a freedom of trading, exporting and importing. But in real life, this doesn't happen because we are depending more than 50% on the exports on Israel, and we're importing a lot to Israel.
This is why I give a reason for Palestinians to feel frustrated, because they have been, or we have been, as Palestinians, struggling for long time, and we had suffered a lot, and we're still suffering from the Israelis. Every time they have military attacks against, especially against Gaza, and hundreds of innocent people killed, and the international community deal with it as something normal.
We are very happy. I'm very happy to have Palestine as a state, but at the same time, there is more important things than having a state or having the word state as much is the human being and the human rights of our Palestinian people.
A majority of Palestinians living with no water and electricity for around 3 months in 2008. I remember from March, April, May. That was the hardest time. I remember I saw people in the street just running around each other to have something is basic that is available in every part of the world at this time. That was just a sign that you imagine people struggling for their nationhood, struggling for their independent state, and at the same time, they struggle for their basic needs, having access to water and electricity. And that was because of the Israeli imposition of closure over Gaza, and Gazan people were not allowed to go out of Gaza for medical treatment. And at least I remember my mother was severely sick, and there was no medical treatment in Gaza for her in Gaza. And we accepted the reality that, she's going to die, and she died actually because she didn't have medical treatment in a proper place.
What's going to happen to the Palestinian who can't return to Palestine, who's been living all their lives, generation after generation, outside Palestine? What's going to happen to them? They never discussed the rights to return. They only discussed the word state, but they never discussed more important issues than that.
Again, they have experienced another war of 8 days, but it was much harsher, as I heard from my friends, my sisters, my brothers. 165 people, innocent people, were killed. The majority of them are children. 120 houses were completely demolished, and around 9,000 were partly damaged. Although the electricity was off most of the time in Gaza because of the closure, and the hospitals, like medical assets, were not available. That was even before the Israeli attack. The Israeli attack in last November made the basic health services, the basic economic services needed for people, for civilians, very rare and not enough for meeting the basic needs, or especially the basic health needs. So electricity was off around 16 hours a day. Of course, water. Most Gazan people use unclean water, water not good for drinking. Sewage system was not operating properly because of the cut of power, or electricity cut. Some schools were destroyed. Children stopped going to their schools for some time, and now the government started to reconstruct what was destroyed. So there is no space for the Palestinian economy to grow normally, and it's always under destruction if they make little growth or economic growth, and basically by the support of the international community. It's not based on their productive resources, because actually Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, we don't have a control over our natural resources. We don't have control over borders or over export and import. Our leadership, both the leadership in Ramallah, or what is called national secular leadership, and also Hamas, are not actually representing the majority of Palestinians. They have been, saying that they represent their own people, but actually they don't, because they don't know the level of desperation, the level of frustration that people live in, and actually the politics reflects that the political and economic interest of the leadership rather than the actual interest and the actual problems that Palestinian people live in or have been living in for decades.
A state means you have your own passport, you have your own borders, you have your own airport. Even if you don't have an airport, you have your own borders. You're free to move under control of one government. In our country, we have two governments. They're not working together at some point. And if they are calling us a state, we still don't have so many rights like any other state would have. So how come we're a state and we're not really a state in the same time? So we're a state, but with some limitation.
Hamas came in a time when the national secular movement was not so much representing poor people who constitute the majority of Palestinians. So Hamas covered this gap and started to meet the actual needs of Palestinian people, especially those who live in the camps, in the village. Also, they build up their mobilization strategies based on the ethics of Islam, which is internalized in people's life. Their activism was rising during the first Intifada, and they mobilized people based on national resistance against the Israeli occupation. They were more honest about the representation of Palestinian political issue. They were not corrupted comparing to other, nationalist factions.
I would like, and I'm hoping that Palestinians would be able to have control over our land, to have control over our economy, to be able to trade and help each other. We could control food, products. We could control economic movement between us and whether Egypt or Jordan, the neighbor countries.
I appreciate this experience and waiting to see what's coming in the near future in terms of Hamas negotiations about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
And I would like to go back home and apply what I learned, teach other people in my community, help other people to understand what's going on in the world.
I'm staying here for a very short period of time for maybe the sake of security for my children, basically, but it's not a long-term plan. I don't feel that this country would give me anything better than what my home country gives me. It's my belonging that bring me back to Gaza, and although I'm here, I'm working for, about, and with Gazan people.
The reason I won't like to go back, or one of the reasons I won't like to go back, is security. If one day I plan to have a family, I'll be so scared how to raise my family and how to live securely in a place, no electricity, no water. You don't need to worry about educating your children or finding food for your children. So this is what I'm hoping.
As a mother who lived like 3 generations experiencing war, uncertainty, insecurity, what I just hope for Palestinian people, for Palestinian children, is to live in peace.
شمس الهوى